Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss how the Brexit deal does very little for the largest sector of our economy, and how Boris Johnson has even conceded the point ahead of commending the agreement to Parliament later this week. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, the EU have said that they are going to decide what access to financial service operators will have in the EU in the new year. Now, I gather the situation is that there's to be an agreement between the EU and the UK on standards by March. I think that's supposed to be by March of next year. And the thing is, it's down to the EU to decide whether or not to grant equivalence, just like it's down to the UK whether to grant equivalence with EU operators. It's not laid out in Boris Johnson's agreement, you see, with the EU. They will make their decision based on what ultimately suits them. Now, the situation here is, you could say, well, it sort of works both ways. Here's the thing, though. For all the British exceptionalism spouted by Brexiteers, there is one sector of the economy that we genuinely were exceptional with. When it comes to the EU, the one sector that absolutely dominates, and that is the financial services sector. It's very genuinely something that is more competitive than the EU's version. And we didn't even manage to get that. That was our most important sector, and we couldn't really get anything tied down in the agreement. Boris Johnson has said that the deal, which he says represents what others called achieving the impossible, has not met his ambitions on financial services. So he's admitted that it doesn't give him what he wanted on financial services. Now, here's the thing, first of all, about that impossible achievement. Indeed, people, myself included, have pointed out that it takes years to negotiate a trade deal, especially between large economies where they'll both fight for every inch. But does this agreement represent the impossible or even the unprecedented being achieved? Not really, no. Because he achieved it in such a short term by essentially agreeing to everything the EU wanted. This is everything. There's nothing absent in the deal that the EU insisted on. We didn't get the EU to remove a single red line. All of ours are gone. Nothing at all has gone but the EU wanted. You know, if all he aimed to do was to sign whatever the EU put in front of him, he could have done that the day after we left the EU, which is what he promised in the first place anyway. Remember, all these trade deals are going to be ready to sign the day after we leave the EU. He could have actually done that if he'd have just wanted to sign whatever they put in front of him. The Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, who's also piped up after being absent for weeks, people have been asking where he is, he's stayed a bit low, he's now come back out into the public, and he said that the UK would like to do things differently on financial services. He also said that he hopes the two parties could work together. Now, they will be doing that as soon as Parliament's back. The Treasury, which is his department, will absolutely be working very earnestly with the EU, preferably away from the media spotlight, to come up with something pretty quickly by March. But the thing is, the EU is not going to work together on this one. Why would they? As has been said many times before, certainly by me, the original European project, just to go way back in terms of concept here, was a peace project. It was intended to finally stop the destructive cycle of European powers constantly going to war with each other. Alliances kept changing and the sides kept changing, but ultimately it was always European powers at war with each other all the bloody time. Now, the way it did this, the way it achieved this peace, which has held, was not by holding hands and releasing doves or getting some stoner to wander the streets calling out peace, man, but by binding themselves together. You know, they made everyone in the initially small club economically interdependent, completely reliant on one another. The closer the ties between them, the more costly it would be to engage in hostilities. It naturally brought them together in a sort of harmony. Yes, they were still looking out for national interests, of course, but they had to do it together. It was in their shared interest. You know, the fact that it helped power their economies upwards post-war was a deliberate but secondary consequence. And it's that consequence that obviously attracted the UK and other newer members to join, of course. The reverse is now true in the UK, now that we've left. If we'd have left with lots of close ties, if we'd have left along the lines that was being discussed before the referendum, it wouldn't have been in the EU's interest to treat us harshly on anything. In fact, they wouldn't have needed to, because those ties would be very, very close. But we've chosen to leave with few remaining ties. That's been the whole point of it, according to Brexiteers. So not only can the EU afford to treat us harshly on those areas where there is no formal cooperation, it will be expected of them. It's in their interest to do so. Look, here's something everyone in the UK should be able to agree with, Brexiteer or rejoiner, or neither. It is the job of the UK government to make the UK as competitive as possible. Is there anybody who would disagree with that? I think that's self-evident. And being competitive means that you make your country more competitive than others. Part of that is pulling a few down. You know, as well as building yourself up, it's also knocking a few down where you can. Now, apply the same logic to the EU. It is the job of the EU government, the Council, the EU Commission, the EU Parliament, to make the EU as competitive as possible. That means they need to do whatever they can to make themselves as competitive as possible over the rest of the world, as much of the world as possible, preferably all of it. And that also means they build themselves up, but also if they can elbow a few down, well, that's what they will do. We are now part of the competition. They will do us few favours on services, only what is in their interest. Anything that they give us, they will give us some things, it will be for reciprocal advantage. And it will be things they can afford to give away, and all of which can be withdrawn if circumstances change, because there's nothing in the deal that stops them doing that. They won't give us anything that gives us a competitive boost over them. That would be a dereliction of duty on the part of the EU. In fact, what's more, they won't give us a competitive edge even over a third party that happens to have a close arrangement with the EU. Because they've got a close arrangement with other countries, not such a close arrangement with us, so they'll favour those other countries. No part of our services sector is going to get a competitive boost against the EU, which it would have had. I mean, we were very competitive. We still will be, just not as much. But as a result of Brexit, we're not going to gain a competitive advantage. This is because we have not agreed anything that allows for it. If the EU get to control all aspects of UK service trade in the UK, then how can we get an advantage? And they can change the trading conditions for us at a moment's notice. Sunak talked up what he called a stable regulatory cooperative framework in the deal. What he's referring to are EU rules. If we play by them, we can have some limited access to their markets. If we don't, and we don't have to, then they can take their ball away from us. You know, he said that this will give people reassurance that we will remain close to the EU on things like equivalence decisions, which is what he needs and what we're not getting straight away. We're hoping for them in March. The thing is, he's wrong. He's quite wrong. It won't. He's possibly lying, but he's certainly wrong. The problem is that Sunak forms part of a government that keeps talking about diverging from EU rules, doing its own thing, sticking two fingers up at the EU. And that talk does the opposite of reassure. Because even if we remain aligned with EU standards and rules, the simple fact that the government keep talking about diverging means that there's a risk that that equivalence could be retracted at a moment's notice. More precisely, it's 30 days notice. So would you, for example, invest a lot of money in a UK-based business on the strength of a hope that the government, spouting this sort of rhetoric, would not follow through on their threats? Would you really have a lot of confidence that this government's just all mouth and trousers and wouldn't actually follow through? Or would you set up an office in an EU country to offer the same service with actual stability for the long term? I know what I would do, and I know what actual service providers have been doing and will no doubt continue to do so, because we spent much of the past couple of years with those financial services sector businesses convinced that Boris Johnson was going to cut a deal that took account of the importance of the City of London to the UK economy. I know financiers are gamblers at heart, but this just sounded like madness. The EU are going to be very hard over this issue. It's possible that putting off their decision until the new year is an example of this. They say they need the UK to clarify what standards it intends to adopt to check that they are genuinely not divergent with the EU standards in order to grant equivalence. Now that's possible, that all sounds fair, and that may well be the reason. But I'm also not so sure, because let's say the government do that. Let's say. Are the EU going to trust them after this year anyway? Will they, Al? In fact, the proof of this is that the UK government wanted the EU to include rules over withdrawing equivalence in the agreement, just like they did with Japan. It's specifically because the EU don't trust Boris Johnson that they refuse to do this. You know, they have the system that exists in the EU-Japan deal. Boris Johnson just wanted to replicate that. The EU said, no, we'll do it for Japan because we can trust Japan. We won't do it for you. You read between the lines. What our Brexit government clearly wanted was to have a system of arbitration essentially over such decisions like that. So what would happen is, in their mind, this is how it worked. They'd change their standards, but they'd argue that it was still equivalent standards, even though it's blatantly not. And then they'd tie the EU up in years-long legal processes with the UK enjoying the competitive advantage of undercutting the EU. Oh, how clever we all are. We stitched them up like a kipper. Unfortunately, the EU aren't actually that stupid. And Boris Johnson has made it as plain as day that he and his government are not to be trusted. So no such system exists in the agreement. The decision on equivalence is down to the EU. And I wonder if the EU are just deliberately giving our service operators a taste of life without equivalence for a while. Because I think they could have just granted it. I think they could have just looked at the situation and gone, look, okay, your standards at the moment are EU standards. You haven't diverged them yet. We'll grant equivalence and we'll just keep an eye on it. And if you diverge, then we'll remove it. Just, you know, there's your incentive. They could have done that. They absolutely could have done that. They didn't. So I really just think, like I saw it in the Financial Times, for example, it pointed out that it will mean that the City of London becomes less competitive. Not just than similar centres in the EU. It'll become less competitive than centres in America and Japan when it comes to selling services to the EU, for example. Overnight, on the 1st of January, the service providers in the City of London that are going to be overnight suddenly less competitive than in America. America doesn't have a free trade agreement with the EU, but that doesn't matter for this, does it? Give them a taste of what it's like for a while as a warning of what will happen if the UK tries to follow up on its boast of diverging from EU rules. And because the Johnson couldn't con the EU into having a lengthy legal process in place for withdrawing equivalence, if the UK puts anything in place that the EU even think changes the playing field, they don't have to worry about it. They don't have to worry, is it going to meet some legal test? They just give their 30 days notice. We don't like this. In 30 days' time, we're removing your equivalence. That's it. For whichever parts of the service sector they deem appropriate. It's up to them. No legal process, no referring to treaties. They'll just do it. And it'll sink our competitiveness further. To say that the deal does not meet Johnson's ambitions for the financial sector, as he calls it, may be an understatement. It places the sword of Damocles above their heads. He's completely screwed over the largest sector of our economy, the most genuinely competitive sector in our economy, and given it absolutely no certainty for the long term. He's placed it into a volatile trading environment. And it will remain a large sector, of course. No one's saying it's going to disappear. But it will shrink. And it already has. And that was just due to the threat that a deal would not be struck that protected them. Now that they know that a deal has not been struck to protect them, it can only continue in that direction. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.